Hello, everyone, and welcome to Interact Amsterdam Virtual Conference 2023. We're delighted to be back on your screens this year with some top talks from some of the best in UX design and accessibility. Over the next 2 days, we've got 6 sessions on the future of design, with talks on how to design in a more sustainable way, creating the experienced design teams of the future, and the future of accessibility. Thanks to everyone that's joined us. We hope you find the event valuable. All the sessions over the next couple of days will be recorded and available exclusively to everyone that signs up. We should have those ready for you at the end of the day. So yeah, let's get started with our first talk, brought to you by Principal UX Designer and Illustrator here at Nomensa, Emily Trotter, with her talk, Planet-Centered Design. In this talk, Emily will explore how we can design in a more sustainable way and the importance of keeping the planet in mind when designing and building digital products and services. As always, please join in the discussion in the chat. Just make sure your chat settings are switched to everyone and not just hosts and panelists, and that way everyone can see your messages. And if you've got any questions, you can submit them using the Q&A function, and I'll get through as many as I can with Emily at the end. We're using auto-generated captions from Rev. There is a chance some of these may get a bit muddled live, just as is the nature of them, but we'll make sure these are tidied up when we post the recording on our YouTube channel. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Emily to kick things off.
Oh, thanks, Henry. Okay. Hopefully you're seeing my screen now. Henry, can you see that?
Yep, all good.
Brilliant. Okay. So morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm Emily, and actually, this is my quote here on the screen. I put it in quote marks to make it feel more grand and to make me feel a bit more powerful. So I've always had this kind of curiosity and passion for both the natural world and for art. I went down the path of art and design and then specialised into digital design, UX design, which is what I do here at Nomensa. I really love my job, like making things a tiny bit better for people, improving experiences, making things inclusive and accessible. Feels good. But I always had this kind of nagging feeling that I'm leading 2 lives. My 2 passions were kept separate. I felt this kind of disconnect from nature. So realizing that digital design can be done sustainably was sort of like this lightning bolt moment for me. A realization that I can connect nature and digital. So my goal today is to share this connection with all of you. Something that I'm passionate about, and I've been on this journey of research into sustainable digital design, and I'm really excited to bring these new techniques and methods into my practice as well. This year I've been involved in the first release of the Web Sustainability Guidelines with W3C. They're available online now, so I really encourage everyone to take a look at that and learn in more depth. But for now, I'm going to talk about the problem and how we might design some solutions. So first up, let's explore the problem. So if I was to ask you, what's the largest coal-powered machine ever created? What would you picture? I imagine that most people would picture something like this, kind of like power plants, chimneys and smoke, pollution. When in fact, the internet is the largest coal-powered machine ever created. The internet is estimated to emit 2 to 5% of the world's carbon. So if the internet was a country, it would be one of the world's top 5 carbon polluters. And this is expected to grow considerably by 2030 as well. It's highly likely that the internet is a bigger polluter than Japan. Highly likely a lot bigger than the aviation industry. Certainly bigger than all the other countries that aren't in the top 5. And it's a bigger carbon polluter than the whole of the UK. The Netherlands is much lower as well, around 0.46% roughly. So it's way bigger than that too. It's estimated that 5.4 billion people are using the internet in 2023, which is around 2/3 of the world's population. And that's an increase of 45% in the last 5 years. So it's increasing really, really quickly as well. 1.7 billion people were estimated to have come online during that 5-year period. For the average person, that's around 6 hours and 40 minutes online per day. So, transactions and travel, work, admin, entertainment, health, life, death, like it touches absolutely everything. We have to actively seek offline retreats away from the internet. It's so like ingrained in our everyday lives. There's no going back, really. But blissful ignorance. Most people, including designers as well, are unaware of the impact that digital has on the planet, which is not anybody's fault. It's just one of these things. Digital design is perceived to be invisible. It's not something that you can touch or pick up or smell or carry, walk through or walk around. It's made of like numbers and codes, and it's experienced through screens and virtually. So it can be switched off, and it exists parallel to physical life. And this is what causes the disconnect between digital design and physical effect. If we can't see it, how can it be damaging the planet? And it doesn't help that digital design has like embraced that narrative with its common language as well. Think of the words like the cloud and wireless and Wi-Fi, airdrop, they're all kind of playing into that kind of narrative. So it was a lightning bolt for me that sustainable digital design connects nature and digital, but is this the same for other people? So I took the question out to my network, and I asked people, are you interested in sustainable digital design? And do you have the skills and knowledge to practice sustainable digital design? So when the answers came back, like 100% of people were interested in it, with a slight majority not being aware of it before. But no one actually said, yes, I have the skills and knowledge to practice it. So we want to help, but we don't know how. And if we're to tackle this as a design community, we need to be aware of it, and we need the tools and the knowledge to practice it as well. So if the internet is the largest coal-powered machine ever created, like how does the internet have a carbon footprint? Well, it comes down to data. So energy is used to store data, to transfer data, and then it's used by the end user to consume data. So it's this kind of many-layered, like complex system, which I'm going to completely oversimplify right now so that we can all hold this kind of basic concept in our minds. So when you build a digital product or service, the materials are stored as data in data centers. There are thousands of data centers around the world. They're noisy, they're power hungry, they get really hot, and they need to be cooled by water. Everything is backed up. So they have 2 power supplies, they've got 2 water cooling supplies. They're using resources like just to exist. And then the end user device, like phones, laptops, TVs, watches, they all need to be powered. Whether it's battery or mains, they're consuming power for you to consume content. And then when you access a website with that device, that data needs to transfer from A to B. So energy powers that transfer through the telecoms network. And the geographical distance it's traveling also makes a difference in the amount of energy required. So as a general rule, the more data transferred, the more energy used, and the longer someone spends consuming that data, the bigger the carbon footprint is going to be. So our job to reduce is to reduce how much resources are being used, is to make each journey and each interaction as efficient as possible. But efficiency isn't the end of the story. So in the late 1700s, James Watt designed a steam engine that used coal more efficiently, making coal more cost effective. And the industry was like well excited about this, it's cost savings. It's opening up all these opportunities, like to ship more, to ship further, to ship more quickly. So as you can guess, efficiency didn't cut down that coal consumption, but in fact, like drastically increased it in many industries. It's what we know now as Jevons paradox, or the rebound effect, when in the long term, an increase in efficiency in resource use generates this increase in resource consumption. Efficiency alone is not enough to reduce that overall consumption of energy. We need to couple it with policies or regulations or design that limit the use of energy in order to address these long-term consequences. Consider the cautionary tale of the humble email. All the trees that we thought we were saving when we switched from paper to digital. But, you know, as the numbers say, with 8.3 billion emails sent per day in the UK, that's 124 per person per day. I think we can all agree that we've gone beyond swapping letter writing for writing an email. The average person wouldn't be writing 124 letters a day and paying for a stamp to send each one. So in simpler terms, when things are quick, easy, and cheap, we consume more of them. So I've made this talk as positive and practical as possible, like trying to avoid climate anxiety. We're smart, we know there's a problem, but this next information kind of floored me when I read it in the Sustainable Web Design book by Tom Greenwood. But it also kind of helped to frame my thoughts around this kind of paradox with efficiency. So climate lag. Climate lag means emissions don't impact the planet's climate straight away. Today, we're experiencing the effect of greenhouse gas emissions that were generated during the 70s to 90s. So even if we stop emitting greenhouse gases right now, we've guaranteed that climate change is going to get worse over the next few decades, because we've already emitted those gases over the past few decades. So we're kind of locked into this future. First we cry, then we act, right? So let's get on to the next part, which is about getting practical. So as designers, I believe we need this kind of two-pronged approach to this. Firstly, to understand energy consumption and build efficient digital products. And then secondly, to be mindful of that Jevons paradox or rebound effect, to design resilient digital products. Now, building efficient products is something we have quite a lot of control over as designers. We can't control the end user's device, but we can control what we're serving to them. So here are the principles of building efficient digital products. We've seen how data costs energy. So number one is to eliminate any waste. The less data, the better. Cut down on the content that you serve people and be kind of disciplined, exercise quality over quantity. Number two is to improve the efficiency. So with those cherry-picked assets you have after eliminating waste, you can optimize and compress them and make sure they're as small as possible in file size, and then ensure the code you use to serve the assets is working really hard as well. And then number three is using clean energy to power what's left. So with everything built as streamlined and optimized and efficient, you can mitigate that energy cost by choosing renewable energy source wherever possible. So no matter what your product is, these principles apply. Even if it's literally like a streaming platform, do the best you can to make that content small and serve it efficiently, and then choose renewable source of energy to do the rest. But what does good look like? So the problem with using the word sustainable is that by definition, it means causing little or no damage to the environment, and therefore we're able to continue doing whatever it is for a long time. So with that in mind, the best case scenario for a digital product is zero emissions to not exist at all, which is not achievable. So this advice kind of helped me as a starting point. We should accept or acknowledge that everything we do as humans is somehow having some sort of negative impact on the natural environment. We can't exist without using resources. So accepting this gives us kind of permission to still be designers, to keep going, but it also allows us to think consciously from zero up. So the objective becomes, how low can you go? And to meet this objective, we need to know how much carbon our products are emitting. So this is a tool built by Whole Grain Digital called the Carbon Calculator. It measures carbon emissions by measuring the data transfer when loading a web page, calculating the amount of electricity associated, and then converting that into a figure for CO2. So, for example, I tested the homepage of JurassicWorld.com, and the result wasn't too good. It gives you an estimate of grams of carbon produced every time someone visits the web page. And this one is 1.24 grams. And the result also factors in whether or not the web hosting is powered by renewable energy. So Jurassic World has got a green tick there, which is good. To find a good example, I tested the website of Whole Grain Digital, people who created the calculator, and as expected, they've got a good result. But you can see that their web page, kind of on the right-hand side there, it still has images. It actually also has some animation, so it's not like completely devoid of life. So by testing web pages to calculate this estimate of emissions, you can start to define yourself a page budget for designers to work within. You can test your current site or competitor sites to establish this kind of best-in-class example. And then you can look at building your absolute bare minimum page and test that as well. And that then gives you this kind of space to work within. And you can challenge yourself to go as low as possible within that space when you start to design and build. And when you get to the design of the site, you can consider each and every element you're adding to a page as a carbon cost. High cost elements like images, videos, animations have got to provide value to earn their keep. So ask yourself, if I add this thing and it reduces efficiency, what's the carbon cost versus value? And then you can spend that budget kind of strategically across journeys. So high impact moments, those like images and animations and things, will likely increase the data required and therefore the carbon cost. So you've got to decide carefully when to add these high impact brand moments and offset that with other key moments being much more simple and streamlined. For example, your landing page might be a brand moments that high impact to orientate the user and kind of, engage and excite people. But then, maybe the next step is some search results where you can dial that right down to the brand to more of like a supportive role where there's less noise, it's more succinct, less intrusive action. And then you can dial it up a bit more if you come to something like a product family page. And then, slightly dialing down as you're on a product detail page where the user is consuming detail and like making decisions. So it doesn't need to be as high impact there. And then right down to a real like functional friction-free checkout. And then by this point, you can start thinking, what's the total journey cost and how does it average on energy consumption? I mean, this is kind of a model that we use anyway when we're designing to create brand cadence. So you can dial up and down the brand presence depending on the situation to support the mode that the user is in. And working this way will just help to keep journeys smooth, like engaging at the right moment and ensuring like transactional tasks are really friction-free. Okay, so here's another question for you. A website has 2 million views a month. How much would you have to shave off a single file that's being loaded on that website to save the CO2 equivalent of 4 flights from Amsterdam to New York? Would it be 1 kilobyte, 1 megabyte, or 100 megabytes? It's 1 kilobyte. 1 kilobyte is absolutely minuscule. So shaving off a single kilobyte saves the same amount each month as 4 flights from Amsterdam to New York. Like when I first read this bit of research, I was like, the power we've got as designers, this is incredible. So where can we start shaving off these kilobytes then? Like the ways to achieve low emission combined front end assets, code, processes, and also hosting, as we've seen. But a lot of these efficiencies are achieved with best practice design and development. But as you can see, a lot of this can be considered and defined at a brand level. So before you even get to designing a brand in your digital product, you can make purposeful, sustainable choices, allowing like data saving constraints to influence your brand. So to run through a few examples of these, images are the worst offenders. Detail is data. The more detailed the image, the larger the file size is going to be. So choosing simpler, less complex compositions can immediately save on the amount of data. So in this example, the images on the left and right are exactly the same apart from their subject matter. And you can save 65% of file size in this instance by choosing the simpler composition on the right. Blur can also reduce data. So by choosing the focus of the image, in this case, I decided that the person was the focal part of the story, and using a soft focus style to add blur to other areas, I can lower this particular file size by 43% by adding that blur. Reducing the number of colors in your image can decrease the size. This example is quite drastic, where we've gone from full color to black and white, but you can imagine there's lots of other stops along the way. Just by like tweaking to a limited palette can also reduce file size. I mean, artists have been using these techniques for decades, using areas of like high and low detail to guide the viewer around an image, allowing the image to communicate its intended message. Because after all, if an image is worth adding, then it must be communicating something. So using discipline and tried and tested methods and techniques will help with that communication. A quick kind of look around the web, and you can see, well-designed brands. These techniques are being favored, not necessarily for sustainability, but for their aesthetic quality, like using simple compositions, areas of blur to highlight what's important. The same again, but with stylized motion blur to add energy to the image. Cutting out backgrounds and replacing with simple shapes, removing backgrounds altogether, reducing the number of colors being used, using simple, flat graphical illustrations, and blur and reduce detail everywhere but where they want you to look. These stylistic choices that create a high-end aesthetic coincide with sustainable design techniques, simple, selective, and disciplined. Images are classed as the worst because they are used more frequently, but videos really are the biggest energy consumption to store, to transfer, and it's also using the power of the end user's device. So use them sparingly. Be selective about when you use them. Make them short and meaningful. Every millisecond counts. I experimented with this video from Patagonia's homepage and cut it from 9 seconds to 3 seconds to reduce the file size by 66%. So you have to ask, like, is it worth that longer loop to set a scene? And another thing here that unfortunately Patagonia are guilty of is autoplay. So aside from the accessibility issues, our development team found that the computation to load a video was 80% higher with autoplay switched on. When it comes to vector graphics, think simpler shapes. Each point requires processing to read the image, so the fewer points, the better. On this example here, I actually used the simplify tool in Illustrator, and it automatically reduced from 1,322 points down to 640 points, which is a 47% reduction in file size. And that's before I did any manual size changes to this as well. And it doesn't really change the image too much. Colors are an interesting one as well. Your color palette can make a difference. So LED screens have a single backlight that illuminates the whole screen. This means that no matter what color is displayed, even black, the light is always fully on. However, OLED screens light each pixel up independently when it's needed. So this gives us control over the energy usage of the screen by choosing which colors to use. OLED screens are actually trending upwards in adoption by manufacturers as well, because it's better picture quality. So they're catching up with LED for dominance. So screen energy is probably around 10% of the website energy on the user's device. White is close to 100% of that screen energy. So we can reduce the energy use by about 90% by using a dark background. And it's not just black and white makes a difference. Black uses the least energy, red and green are close behind. Blue uses about 25% more than red and green, and white is the highest at almost 100% of screen energy. So you can aim for a darker palette that uses less blue. When it comes to fonts, each type style has to be transferred and loaded separately. But system fonts are free. They're like little eco-warriors going in to do their work without any carbon cost. So you can consider using system fonts for the bulk of the work, like for body copy, and then offset that with some custom font files for your kind of heading styles. Custom font files can significantly increase the file size of web pages. So multiple typefaces and font weights can add up quickly. So be disciplined when you're defining your brand, like limit yourself and choose a small and select number of styles for your heading fonts. Do you really need like 30 odd styles of Muso? And no brand defines a waffly tone of voice, but it's easy to let this kind of slip in reality when time is short and you're getting content up. But the more content there is, and the more pages there are to load and navigate through, the longer the journeys, the more carbon emissions we're racking up. This is also where a well-designed IA plays a part. Like wasting the user's time is also wasting carbon. So those were just some examples of how we can embrace sustainability from the ground up within brand design, which is pretty exciting. And the assets will be a part way there already before you even design your product. During design and build, there are many more ways to improve efficiency, exporting assets as the most suitable file type, compressing everything, and this is before the developers do their part as well. For more like design and build guidance, I again recommend you take a look at the Web Sustainability Guidelines from W3C. Energy efficient websites are better at almost everything. If nothing else, like you've just built a better performing website all around. Better performance, better user experience, better inclusivity. Like everyone's going to be happy with a less energy intensive experience, especially like those with data limits or like using a product when you're in areas of low connectivity. So we've built our thing and it's as efficient as possible. But what does it enable? Or what could it enable in the future? How might we design this resilient digital product and be mindful of this paradox or the rebound effect? The job of designers includes a certain degree of prophecy. We always have to have one foot in the future. Thinking forwards is kind of part of our design process. And this is especially so when sustainability goals or unintended consequences might not be realized like for decades. So a natural starting point is to explore the relationship between your product and the planet. So I've got 4 kind of suggestions, food for thought as like a starting point on how we might, start to consider this relationship. Firstly, journey maps or service maps are like a common task during the discovery process of product design. So you can use these maps to understand the relationship between your product and the planet's natural resources. Add like an additional swim lane into your maps to identify where there are reliances on energy, on water, on minerals. And you don't have to stop at digital either. Like, the beauty of this exercise is that a service map generally blends physical and digital together, giving you an opportunity to collaborate with physical product designers, tap into their knowledge about like resource use. And like, when you're mapping these, you can start to see where are their peaks, and can alternatives be found. Number 2, prophesize together as a team. So this is quite a fun one. In 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, what might the cost of success be? Like, map the best and worst case scenarios, a bit of like a free thinking exercise. And when you've got those kind of mapped out, you can start thinking, should and could the design include any limitations? What can we design to like mitigate these negative impacts? And do this as like a whole design team, get everyone involved. Third one, anti-KPIs. So anti-KPIs enable design to mitigate negative scenarios or harmful consequences. It was a bit of a theme at like last year's Interact. The example used there was this potential conflict between the business goal of encouraging more streaming and the WHO advice. So during COVID, users were streaming 3.2 hours per day on average, whereas the WHO advice was up to 1 hour per day. So the talk explored ways to design kind of speed bumps into those journeys to help break the streaming habit and encourage breaks. And this type of design could be sponsored by an anti-KPI goal. As designers, like, we're trusted to be a part of business conversations. So it's really crucial we understand business, so we can use our tools and understanding of the world to evolve business. It's a real opportunity for designers here. And in this case, could it be possible to link customer retention more closely to customer well-being and happiness than to a simple metric of like viewing hours, streaming more and more? In the long term, somebody's health, mitigating unhealthy habits and depression might lead to a better customer retention. And then finally, my fourth kind of idea for this section, in physical product design, cradle to grave is used to understand what happens at the end of a product's useful life. And we can easily do this for digital as well, to stop adding to the sort of data graveyard. Can accounts be auto-closed and data deleted after periods of inactivity? I was quite pleased to receive this email on the screen telling me that my account for something called UK TV Play, which I couldn't even remember ever signing up to, was going to be auto-deleted. I was like, yeah, that's great, yeah, delete it. But then saw that actually they were going to delete my account and anonymize my data. And I was thinking, no, don't anonymize it, just delete it. We don't need it. It doesn't need to be hoarded. So let's try and design ways to stop being digital hoarders. So they are my 4 kind of food for thought ideas of exploring that relationship between your product and the planet. And I'm sure there are many more ways that the UX industry will be able to root out some of these like design solutions and innovations. So a little sidestep here, the elephant in the room, regulation. So much like digital accessibility, we're expecting sustainability requirements to become mandatory in one way or another. It will become even more important and mainstream to find that connection between business goals and sustainable values. And it makes commercial sense to tackle this now. The government have targets already, and they're starting to hold businesses accountable for resource consumption in many ways. Models to measure social value are already being used like across public and private sector. If you can measure and prove the efforts you're making, you'll give your business a competitive advantage here. But like, what might this future be? You can already add like CO2 emission badges to your web pages. Could it be energy efficiency ratings to put the decision into the public's hands? the Sustainable Web Design .org have recently launched their digital carbon rating system. So it's kind of moving in that direction. Or might there be like this kind of harder line stance, moving to energy limits or carbon taxes? Imagine trying to access a website, like a supermarket, and being told, oh, I'm sorry, you can't access this today because this website's exceeded their daily energy limit already. Please try again tomorrow. And actually, the European Commission only last month released the Declaration on European Digital Rights and Principles, which is aimed to promote a digital transition. And this proposal includes a digital sustainability pillar. A scan read here, you can see terms like standardized methods to measure and making digital technologies more energy efficient and keep rebound effects under control. So this is, pretty hot off the press. So we're yet to see how it's going to manifest, but I just wanted to include it here to show how current this kind of conversation is. Now, products built within constraints are often the most beautiful and best performing. And this is because they must provide optimum performance under marginal conditions. If you think about kind of high-end sports equipment, camping gear, rock climbing gear, gliders, these products work so well and look so well designed. And climate change is going to force our hand and bring these marginal conditions to digital. The constraint will be natural resources. And that is the future of digital design. It's kind of a simple concept, really. The planet is the big tech platform upon which all other tech relies. And no matter what the future of design, like, will it be the death of the image? All emerging tech and innovations, AI, voice control, it's still, no matter what it is, it's still beholden to the resources the planet can provide. And design that acknowledges this and innovates within this constraint will be the design that survives. And this is going to push creativity and see the rise of like this new kind of exciting aesthetic. It's going to be less about trends and more about form and function. Will it change the products we consume? Will it change our behavior? Like, maybe we'll actually end up spending less time online and more time in our communities and in nature. So if you remember only one example, let it be this: that shaving off a single kilobyte in a file that's been loaded on 2 million websites reduces CO2 emissions that are the same as taking 4 flights from Amsterdam to New York. So if all 169 people who signed up to this talk today did this today, that we'd be saving 676 flights from Amsterdam to New York. So thanks so much for listening, and use your power. I'm just going to end on a couple of inspiration things from my research as well. So there's a link to the Web Sustainability Guidelines on there. There's a really great panorama documentary about cloud damaging the planet, the carbon calculator, and then this book, The Green Imperative by Victor Papanek, which was actually written in the 90s, but still had some really, really good kind of inspiration and advice. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. Such a good talk, albeit pretty scary when looking at just how much a single image can have a massive impact on carbon emissions. But no, I mean, it's definitely something that desperately needs highlighting. And, it's like there's so many quick fixes that can have such a big impact just if everyone gets on board. So yeah, so thank you. It was an amazing talk. If anyone does have any questions, please do submit them now. Emily, there's a few questions popped up. I'm just wanting to know kind of a little bit more about the W3C working group you're part of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so W3C, they're the kind of the people who brought us the accessibility guidelines, which everyone's probably really familiar with. But there's these kind of other community groups going on. And one of them is web sustainability. So it's all these kind of thought leaders in the industry coming together and, putting together these guidelines that cover all sorts from the code of websites, from front end and back end, making efficiencies, UX design, also like business decisions, and it's really this kind of community created set of guidelines. I mean, it's a first draft and they're work in progress. And I joined that kind of community group and learned so much from them earlier this year. So I was kind of there to witness the first draft going online earlier this year. And I know there's like loads of work going on to keep evolving those, and hopefully to push them through to more of more of a recognized guideline that can be enforced as well, a bit like with accessibility. So it's an inspiring community to be a part of and to learn more from. Some big names in there.
Awesome. And you mentioned the first draft's gone live. Are they kind of looking to be kind of formalized, or kind of Marisol here in the chat is asking kind of is there a potential for them to kind of almost merge with the accessibility guidelines? Kind of, they were thinking on kind of use of color, for example, the high resolution pictures. Do you kind of see that as a possibility?
Yeah, perhaps in the future. I think for the moment the timeline is it is this open community, so we're asking kind of people to start using them and to provide feedback on them as well. So there's kind of a GitHub going on where you can provide feedback on bits of guidance, and we're trying to kind of link in other things like lighthouse tests. And with accessibility there are loads and loads of crossovers actually, so that's a really good point to bring up. I don't know that they would be like actually merged together, but I can't see that there'll be kind of conflicts between the two, because that was actually one of the things that when I started out looking into this stuff, my main question, like my hypothesis, was where are there conflicts between user-centered design techniques and planet-centered design? I was looking for any kind of conflicts in the way that we work and our best practice, but actually one of the best kind of findings was that what's good for the planet is also good for people, and it only seems to be in sync. So I imagine in the future the two will be kind of kept separate, because it makes sense from a methodology point of view to keep them, to not try and combine and kind of confuse the two together. But if there were any conflicts that came up, I'm sure they would be marked, but I just can't see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, it does just seem like it's kind of a win-win, kind of for everything, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're the more feedback we get on those draft guidelines, the more they'll kind of evolve, and the more, we're definitely trying to push them towards this more kind of recognized framework that are like the accessibility guidelines. So it's a pretty exciting space and good place to start. I know there's loads of guidance online. If you just start Googling for it, it's like opening a can of worms. You're like, oh, which one do I look at? But I think it's a really good one, given the amount of people involved who really know their stuff and have been working on this for way longer than I have. There's sort of scientists and developers and all sorts of different minds coming together. So I think it's a really good place to look and get some good guidance initially.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, regulation will be coming.
Yeah.
And it's no better time than the present to get your house in order.
Mm-hmm.
Well, awesome. No, I can't see any more questions, so if that's the case, I will wrap up. Emily, thank you so much. That's such a thought-provoking talk. There's lots of people with fantastic feedback in the chat. So yeah, thank you. And thanks to everyone that tuned in. We're gonna have the recording available for you at the end of the day, right after our final talk. So do keep an eye on your emails, and that will pop up in your inbox towards the end of the day. Our next talk is from Vanessa Bennett, who is Director of UX at Dye & Durham, with her talk, Unleashing the Power of Insights. That is at 2 p.m. Central European Time, which is 1 p.m. For those of us here in the UK. There's still time to sign up. So if you haven't done already, please do so. And we hope to see you back then. Emily, thank you again. And yeah, we will see everyone back here at 2 p.m. Central European Time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.